The world outside the fortress was burning. The sky, once blue and endless, had turned into a black roof of smoke and fire. Each explosion shook the earth like the heartbeat of a dying beast, and the walls of the human stronghold trembled as if they would collapse at any moment. The battlefield was no longer soil and stone, it was ash, rubble, and broken machines of war. The air smelled of metal and smoke, mixed with the bitter stench of blood. Every corner of the fortress carried the weight of despair. Inside those walls, men and women clung to their rifles and their courage. Their faces were pale with hunger, their eyes hollow from sleepless nights. Some leaned against the walls with bandaged arms and legs. Others whispered quiet prayers under their breath. But all of them looked toward the same figure at the front, Captain Elira Vance. Elira stood like a statue of iron. Her armor was dented, scratched and scorched black from countless battles. Her visor was cracked on one side, leaving a thin scar visible across her cheek beneath it. To many of the soldiers, she looked less like a woman and more like the fortress itself, wounded, battered but still standing. She had become their symbol, their shield, their reason to keep fighting when everything else seemed lost. She did not speak often. She did not need to. A single glance from her was enough to silence fear and fill her people with a little more strength. The enemy had tried to break her reputation many times, calling her the Iron Saint in both hatred and fear. But even the name the aliens had given her had become a kind of hope for her people. They believed as long as she wore that armor, they could not be broken. But Elira knew the truth. The fortress was dying. Supplies were gone. Ammunition was nearly spent. The food stores were empty and the water tanks almost dry. For weeks, the enemy had encircled them, cutting them off from every road, every sky route, every hope of rescue. The soldiers around her were brave, yes, but bravery could not fill an empty stomach or stop the endless shells that rained down from above. She could see it in their faces. They were holding on, but just barely. The ground shook again as another alien shell exploded against the outer wall. The blast ripped open part of the stone, showering the courtyard in dust and broken fragments. A few soldiers coughed, covering their mouths, their nerves fraying. Somewhere in the distance, a medic shouted for help as another wounded man was dragged into the shelter. The fortress groaned like a living creature in pain. And then the voice came. It was not human. It was deep, metallic, and cruel, carried by the enemy's machines into the comms that still flickered inside the fortress. The voice was heavy with contempt, like it spoke not to equals but to insects. "Human captain," it said, smooth and slow. "Enough games. Take off your armor and step outside. Surrender yourself and perhaps your people will be spared." The fortress went silent. The soldiers froze where they stood, their eyes darting to Elira. Some mouths fell open, others clenched their jaws in anger. A few whispered under their breath, "They'll kill us anyway." Elira said nothing. She simply laid one armored hand against the wall, feeling the vibrations of the next explosion as it landed closer. Her heart was steady, but her mind was heavy. She knew why the Zirath, the alien enemy, wanted her. They had fought her too many times, lost too many battles because of her strategies, her stubbornness, her unyielding will. They feared her armor, the way it made her more than human in their eyes. They thought that if they could strip it away, the humans would finally bow. But Elira also knew something else. They were right about one thing. Her armor was more than just steel and wires. It was her reputation, her protection, her strength. When the soldiers saw her in that armor, they did not see a woman, they saw a symbol that could not be broken. And if she removed it, if she gave herself up, that symbol would die. Yet if she did not act soon, everyone in this fortress would die anyway. The walls would crumble, the soldiers would fall, and her legend would end in silence. Her second in command, a young man barely older than 20 named Corporal Leon, rushed to her side. His eyes were wide, his face pale with both fear and determination. He grabbed her armored arm and shook his head fiercely. "Don't do it, Captain," he whispered harshly. "Don't listen to them. Without you, we fall apart. They're trying to trick you. You can't give yourself to them." Elira turned her head slowly, her visor cracked but her eyes steady. For a moment she simply looked at him. This young soldier who had followed her through hell, who believed in her more than in himself. She wanted to comfort him, to promise him safety. But there was no safety left to promise. Instead, she spoke softly, her voice carrying the weight of truth. "Without hope, we've already fallen. Her words hit harder than any explosion. Some soldiers turned away, their eyes wet. Others clenched their fists tighter, anger mixing with despair. They did not want to believe it, but deep inside they knew she was right. The alien voice returned, colder, sharper this time. Remove the armor, human. Step into the open. Show them who you really are. We are waiting. Elira lowered her head, staring down at the battered plates across her chest. They were scratched, cracked, stained with the memories of battles long past. How many lives had she saved behind this armor? How many times had she lifted soldiers back to their feet, reminding them that humanity still stood strong? Her hands trembled slightly as she touched the clasps. This armor had been her identity, her shield, her mask. Without it, the enemy would see not the Iron Saint, not the unbreakable warrior, but just a fragile woman, scarred and tired. She took a deep breath. She could already feel the eyes of every soldier in the fortress pressing against her back, waiting to see what their captain would do. And deep inside, Elira made her choice. The fortress was quiet except for the distant echoes of alien artillery. The silence inside the walls was heavy, pressing against every chest like a stone. The soldiers did not dare to speak loudly. Some only shifted nervously, their armor clinking softly. Others kept their eyes fixed on their captain, waiting for her answer. The alien voice still hung in the air, cold and sharp. Take off your armor, human. Step into the open. Show them who you really are. It was not just a demand. It was a weapon. Words as sharp as blades. The Zirath knew exactly what they were doing. They wanted to strike not with missiles but with fear. They wanted to cut into the human spirit, to prove that their strongest warrior was just another fragile body. Captain Elira Vance stood tall, but inside, her thoughts churned like a storm. She had faced death many times. She had walked into fire, into bullets, into hopeless battles where no one believed they could win. But this was different. This was not about whether she lived or died. This was about what she represented. Her armor was not just iron. It was her history. Every dent and scratch carried a story. The scar across her visor came from the battle at Raven's Hill, where she had led 20 soldiers through a rain of fire and brought back all but 2. The broken left gauntlet had shielded her from a plasma blast on the 3rd day of the siege. Every piece of metal was a memory of standing against the impossible. Without the armor, would her people still believe in her? Or would they see her as she feared? Just a tired, scarred woman who had given everything she could and had nothing left to give. Her heart ached at the thought. Corporal Leon was still at her side. His hand gripped her arm tightly, as if his strength alone could hold her back. His voice shook, but his eyes were fierce. Captain, don't listen to them. You are our shield. If you fall, we all fall. They want to make us lose hope. You can't let them. She turned her head toward him. In the dim light of the fortress, her cracked visor reflected his young, desperate face. He was too young to carry such fear, too young to know what it meant to watch an army die piece by piece. He had faith in her, the same faith that burned in all the soldiers' eyes. But Elira knew something he did not. She knew the fortress would not survive much longer. The food was gone, the ammo almost dry. Reinforcements were not coming. Their world outside was already falling, city after city crushed under the weight of alien fire. This fortress was not a place of victory anymore. It was a place of delay, a sacrifice, and sacrifices demanded a cost. The walls shook again. Dust rained from the ceiling. A broken beam collapsed in the corner, and the soldiers flinched. Another voice rose, a soldier farther back, his tone sharp with fear. Captain, what if they're telling the truth? What if they really will spare us if you give yourself up? Another voice answered quickly, angry and harsh. Spare us? You think the Zirath know mercy? They'll kill her and then they'll kill us too. Arguments began to break out. Some soldiers clung to hope, whispering that maybe the enemy would keep their word. Others shouted back, spitting on the idea, saying surrender was death wrapped in lies. The fortress filled with voices, fear, anger, despair. Elira raised her hand. The voices stopped instantly. Even in that chaos, her single motion was enough to silence them all. She looked over her soldiers. She saw the hunger in their cheeks, the exhaustion in their eyes. She saw the trembling hands that still clutched rifles, though the bullets were nearly gone. These were not warriors anymore, they were survivors. And survivors needed something more than weapons. They needed a reason to keep breathing, to keep fighting. even when there was no chance left. Her voice was calm, steady, though inside her chest a storm still raged. "They fear us," she said slowly, clearly. "If we were already broken, they would not call my name. They would not waste words. They would simply crush us. But they know what I mean to you. They know what I mean to all of us. That is why they demand my armor. They want you to see me as weak. They want you to lose faith." Her soldiers listened, every word sinking into their hearts. Some nodded slowly, some clenched their jaws. Even the ones who doubted her could not look away from her. Corporal Leon whispered again, softer this time. "Then don't give it to them. Don't let them take that from us." Elira's lips tightened. She wanted to agree. She wanted to tell him she would never surrender. But her mind whispered the truth she could not ignore. If she did nothing, they would all die within days. If she acted, maybe, just maybe, something greater could be born from her sacrifice. Her hand touched the latch on her chest plate. She felt the weight of it heavy and cold. This armor had carried her through every battle, every nightmare. It had hidden her scars, her weariness, her humanity. It had made her more than she truly was. But maybe her soldiers did not need an Iron Saint anymore. Maybe they needed to see that a human, fragile and scarred, could still stand unbroken. Her heart tightened at the thought. She knew the cost. If she removed the armor, she would lose the legend. She would lose the shield that protected not only her body, but her people's hope. She would stand naked before the enemy. Not in flesh, but in truth. The comms crackled again, the alien voice dripping with mockery. "Do you hear the silence, human? They are waiting. Show them your weakness. Show them your fear." Elira lifted her head slowly. Behind the cracked visor, her eyes burned. Not with fear, but with a fire that had carried her through every battle. She clenched her fists once, then relaxed them. She turned back to her soldiers, her voice low but strong. "The enemy thinks our strength is in armor. They are wrong. Our strength is in us. In the choice we make right now, do we bow? Or do we stand even when there is nothing left?" The silence that followed was deep and powerful. Every soldier's chest tightened with the weight of her words. Some looked away, unable to meet her gaze. Others straightened, their fear turning slowly into something harder, sharper. Elira felt their eyes on her. She felt their faith. And she felt the heavy truth of what she must do. Her hand rested on the chest plate again. The armor hummed softly, waiting. And with a deep, steady breath, Elira made her choice. The fortress seemed to breathe with her. Every soldier's eyes followed her as she stood there, one hand resting on her armor's chest plate. Outside, the alien bombardment slowed as if the enemy themselves were waiting to see what she would do. The battlefield had fallen into an eerie pause. Captain Elira Vance could hear her own heartbeat inside her helmet. Slow, steady, heavy, each beat reminded her that she was still alive, still carrying the weight of every soul inside the fortress. She knew this choice was not just about her. It was about all of them, about what would happen when she stepped forward. Corporal Leon, still beside her, would not let go of her arm. His voice cracked, filled with both desperation and loyalty. "Please, Captain, don't take it off. Don't give them what they want. You're all we have left." Elira looked at him, and for a moment the captain's iron mask slipped. She saw in him the face of every young soldier she had trained, every life she had sworn to protect. He was so young, his eyes still bright even in this darkness. He was hope in human form, and that hope was clinging to her like a drowning man to a piece of driftwood. But hope was fragile, and hope could die. She touched her cracked visor and spoke, her voice quiet, carrying the weight of her soul. "Without hope, we've already fallen, Leon." The words hurt him more than any wound. He bit his lip, eyes filling with water, but he said nothing more. He knew she had already decided. The soldiers around them shifted uneasily. Some looked at the ground, others at her. Their breaths caught in their throats. No one dared to speak. Even the sound of the bombardment seemed distant, like thunder far away. The alien voice came again, cold and cruel, its tone almost mocking. "Remove your armor, human. Step into the open, or watch them die one by one." The words burned in the air like acid. Elira straightened her shoulders. She no longer looked at the walls or the smoke or even the enemy. She looked only at her soldiers, the men and women who had followed her into fire, who had stood when the world itself seemed to crumble. She wanted them to see her clearly now. Not the Iron Saint, not the legend, but the woman who had fought beside them, bled with them, and carried their pain. Her hands moved slowly to the clasps at her chest. The sound of metal unlocking echoed louder than the guns outside. Click. Then another. Click. Each sound was a nail in the coffin of the legend they had built around her. Corporal Leon stepped back, his breath sharp, his eyes wide with horror. Some soldiers whispered no, under their breath. Others reached forward as if they could stop her, but they froze, powerless against the choice she had made. The first plate of armor fell with a heavy clang against the stone floor. The sound rang out like a bell, final and deep. Alira felt the air against her undersuit. Without the plate, she felt suddenly smaller, more fragile, but she did not stop. Piece by piece, she removed the armor, the gauntlets that had blocked plasma fire, the greaves that had carried her across battlefields, the pauldrons that had shielded her soldiers when nothing else could. Each piece fell to the ground, and each sound carried across the fortress like thunder. When she finally pulled off her helmet, the silence became absolute. Her scarred face was revealed, sweat and ash staining her skin, her hair clinging damply to her forehead. Her eyes were tired but unbroken, burning with a fire that no steel could contain. The soldiers gasped. To them, she looked different without the armor. Smaller, human, vulnerable. Some could not meet her eyes, afraid of what they saw. But others stared harder, realizing something they had never seen before. Alira Vance was not the armor. She was not the steel or the legend. She was just one person, scarred, weary, and breakable. And yet she still stood. She stepped forward, barefoot now, the ground cold beneath her feet. She walked past her soldiers, past the broken walls, toward the shattered gate. Her every step echoed in the silence, heavy and determined. Corporal Leon whispered, his voice trembling, "She's really going." His words were not for anyone but himself, but everyone heard them. The soldiers' hearts were torn. Fear clawed at them, whispering that without her armor, without her shield, they were already dead. But another feeling stirred, faint and fragile at first. Respect. Respect for the courage it took to do what none of them could imagine. Lyra did not look back. If she turned, she feared she would not find the strength to keep walking. So she looked only ahead at the broken gate and the smoke beyond, at the army of Zirath waiting in the shadows. As she reached the gate, she paused. She knew that when she stepped through, everything would change. She would no longer be the Iron Saint. She would no longer be the legend. She would only be Alira Vance, a human woman standing bare against the storm. Her soldiers waited behind her, holding their breath. They wanted to call out, to beg her to stop, but they knew it was too late. And Alira, with her heart steady and her spirit burning, stepped toward the fire. She had chosen. Flesh over iron, humanity over armor, a choice of fire and flesh. The fortress was silent as Captain Alira Vance stood at the broken gate. The air was thick with smoke, and every soldier's heart beat with the same painful rhythm. They had seen their captain lay down her armor piece by piece until the last of it fell away and only the woman remained. For many, it felt like watching the sun fade behind dark clouds. For others, it was like seeing fire itself step out of its cage. Alira stood tall, though her body ached. Without the steel plates, the bruises and scars across her skin were visible. The thin undersuit clung to her form, marked by ash and blood. She looked human, too human. Small, fragile, breakable. But her head was high, and her eyes burned with a strength that no weapon could forge. The sound of the enemy waiting beyond the smoke reached them. Clattering armor, alien growls, the hum of weapons ready to fire. The Zirath army was there in the shadows, watching, waiting for her. Their demand had been answered. She had removed her armor. Now she would face them bare. Behind her, her soldiers could not breathe. Some clutched their rifles tighter, though they had almost no bullets left. Others clenched their fists, unsure whether to cry out or stay silent. They had depended on her armor, her legend, for so long. Seeing her stripped of it was like seeing the last wall fall. And yet, in the middle of that despair, something else began to stir. Corporal Leon whispered, his voice breaking as he watched her walk forward. She's still standing." His words were soft, but they spread like sparks in dry grass. A few soldiers straightened. A few lifted their heads. Even without the iron, their captain was still walking toward the enemy. Alira stepped past the shattered gate. The ground outside was black with soot and littered with craters. The air was hot and heavy with the stench of burning metal. Her bare feet pressed against broken stone and ash, but she did not flinch. Each step carried the weight of choice, the sound of courage echoing in the silence. The Zirath army came into view, row upon row of alien soldiers, their bodies covered in dark armor that glistened under the red glow of the fires. Their eyes burned with hatred, their weapons raised, their snarls echoing in the ruined valley. Behind them, massive war machines towered like beasts, their cannons still glowing from the last barrage. For a moment, the aliens laughed. Their cruel voices filled the air as they looked at the lone human stepping toward them without armor. To them it was pitiful, almost amusing. The Iron Saint stripped down to nothing but flesh and bone. But the laughter did not last. Elira did not walk like prey. She did not stumble, nor did she tremble. She walked like a storm, each step steady and unbroken. Her scarred face caught the firelight, and her eyes locked on the army before her without fear. The sight of her, the sight of a human stripped of all protection and yet still defiant, sent a chill through the enemy ranks. The alien commander stepped forward. His armor was thick and jagged, his voice a guttural growl that echoed across the battlefield. So, the Iron Saint is only flesh after all. Elira raised her chin. Her voice, raw but strong, carried over the silence. You are wrong. The Iron Saint was never in the armor. The strength you fear has always been here. She placed her hand against her chest, in the heart, in the will, in the fire that no machine can destroy. Behind her, the soldiers inside the fortress heard her words, and their hearts surged. Even without armor, she still spoke like a commander, like a leader who would not bend. They pressed closer to the broken walls, watching her face the army alone. The alien commander snarled, but his troops shifted uneasily. They had expected fear, begging, collapse. Instead, they saw a fragile body holding itself higher than their towering machines. They saw a human woman defying them with nothing but her presence. Elira's voice grew louder, cutting through the smoke and fear. You want me? Here I am. But know this, humans are not their armor. We are not our weapons. We are fire in the dark, and even when you strip us bare, we burn brighter than your armies can imagine. Her words rolled across the battlefield like thunder. For a long moment, neither side moved. The silence was heavier than any bombardment. Then behind her, the humans stirred. A voice rose first, shouting her name, Vance! Then another. Vance! Soon the fortress shook not with shells, but with the sound of voices chanting together. Vance! 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 The broken soldiers, the starving, the wounded, they all shouted, their voices rising higher and higher, filling the night with a sound that refused to die. The chant thundered across the valley, reaching the ears of the enemy, shaking their certainty. Elira closed her eyes for a brief second, letting the sound wash over her. She had given up her armor, her legend, everything that made her more than human. But in doing so, she had lit a fire in her people's hearts that no shell could extinguish. The Zirath commander raised his hand, furious, but his soldiers did not move with the same certainty as before. They had seen something they could not understand. A human stripped of all protection, yet stronger than when she was clad in iron. Elira opened her eyes again. They blazed like embers in the smoke. She spread her arms wide, as if to embrace the battlefield itself. Come then. Strike me down. But know this, every blow against me will only make them stronger. The fortress roared with voices in answer. Her soldiers pounded their fists against the walls, screamed her name, lifted their weapons though they had no bullets. They stood taller, straighter, their despair turning to fire. The alien army hesitated. For the first time in weeks, the Zirath did not look unstoppable. For the first time, they looked uncertain. And Elira Vance, barefoot and scarred, stood before them with nothing but her will. The armor had fallen, but the fire inside her blazed brighter than ever. The battlefield was frozen in time. The smoke drifted like slow waves, the broken ground glowed red from scattered fires, and the two armies stared at each other across the ruins. On one side, the fortress, blackened, cracked, nearly falling apart, yet filled with voices that roared their captain's name. On the other, the Zirath army, armored, armed, terrible in number, yet suddenly quiet. Their laughter had died, their certainty broken. At the center stood Elira Vance, stripped of her armor, scarred and weary, but tall and unyielding. Her bare feet pressed against the scorched stones, her body a fragile line before an ocean of alien steel. The Zirath commander's eyes glowed with rage. He had expected her to collapse. He had expected the humans to weep, to fall to their knees, to lose all hope once the Iron Saint was unmasked. Instead, he found himself staring at something he could not understand, a human with nothing still burning like fire. His growl rumbled through the air. "You think words will save you, human? You think your weakness will frighten us?" Illyra raised her chin. Her voice cut across the battlefield, sharper than blades, steadier than the ground beneath their feet. "I think you already are afraid. Look at your soldiers. Look at their eyes. They laugh no longer. You tried to strip me down to weakness, but you only revealed what strength truly is." The Zirath army shifted uneasily. Alien claws tightened on weapons, but their movements lacked the surety of before. Some of them snarled to cover their hesitation. Others glanced at each other, doubt crawling into their hearts. Illyra took a step forward. The ash crunched beneath her feet. Her voice grew louder. "You see flesh and scars and think that is all I am. But what stands before you is not just one human. It is every human who refuses to bow. Every voice behind these walls, every fire that still burns even in the darkest night." Behind her, the chant rose again. "Vance! Vance! Vance!" The fortress shook with it. The voices of the starving, the bleeding, the broken, it all came together into one thunderous cry. It was not just her name anymore. It was defiance given sound. The alien commander slammed his weapon against the ground, furious. Sparks flew. His voice thundered, "Enough! You are nothing. A shell without its shell, a warrior without her steel. You are already dead." Illyra's eyes locked on his, unflinching. "Then strike me down. Kill me if you can. But know this, every drop of my blood will make them rise. Every breath I lose will become 100 voices stronger. You will not break us by killing me. You will only feed the fire." The words rippled through both armies. The humans clenched their fists tighter, lifted their rifles higher, their tired eyes glowing with renewed fire. And among the Zirath, whispers began to stir. Low growls of doubt, the faint cracks of fear in the armor of certainty. Illyra turned her head slightly, just enough for her soldiers to see her face. Her scarred skin glistened with sweat. Her body trembled from exhaustion, but her eyes were alive, burning with the kind of strength that no weapon could forge. "Do not fear their numbers," she said. "Do not fear their machines. Fear is what they want. But we are more than fear. We are the fire that survives after everything else is gone." Her words flowed into her soldiers like breath into lungs. The wounded lifted their heads. The weak stood taller. Even those who had been moments away from surrender now gritted their teeth, fire sparking in their hearts. The alien commander roared again, trying to drown out the sound of hope. His army responded with growls, but their voices did not match the humans' thunder. They could not match it. The humans were fewer, broken and half-starved, yet their cry was louder, fiercer, more alive. Illyra spread her arms wide, standing in the open, making herself the brightest target on the field. "Here I stand, a human with no armor, no shield, no weapon but her will. If this is weakness, then strike me now." The challenge cut through the battlefield like lightning. The Zirath raised their weapons, aiming at her, ready to fire. For a moment, the humans inside the fortress held their breath, terror gripping their hearts. But then Illyra spoke again, her voice like fire in the wind. "If you kill me, you prove nothing. You only prove what we already know, that we can die. But if we die standing, if we die unbroken, then we have already won." The silence that followed was unbearable. Even the machines behind the Zirath seemed to pause, their glowing cannons dimming as if they too listened. The enemy soldiers hesitated, claws trembling on triggers. The commander's growl deepened, but he could feel it, the doubt, the crack in his army's unity. Inside the fortress, Corporal Leon pressed his hand against the wall, his eyes locked on her. He whispered to himself, his voice trembling but filled with awe. "She's not just our captain, she's our fire." And he was right. Illyra Vance stood stripped of her legend, stripped of her armor, yet in that moment she was more than she had ever been. She was not the Iron Saint. She was not the unbreakable armor. She was simply human, fragile, scarred, and still unbending. And that truth was more terrifying to the enemy than any weapon. The Zirath army did not fire. Not yet. Their commander roared again, trying to summon courage back into his troops. But the hesitation had already taken root. They had seen something they could not explain. A woman who should have been broken, standing as if she carried the strength of an entire world in her chest. The humans' chant grew louder, shaking the ruined walls, echoing across the valley, drowning the silence with defiance. "Vance! Vance! Vance!" The night belonged to that cry. Illyra closed her eyes for a heartbeat, letting the sound wash through her. She had lost her armor, yes. She had lost the shield that had carried her for years. But in doing so, she had given her people something greater. Not steel, not protection, but belief. And belief was sharper than any blade. The battlefield held its breath. The smoke moved like slow shadows. The broken walls groaned under the weight of silence, and the two armies stared at each other. In the middle of that ruined land, Captain Illyra Vance stood unarmored, scarred and human, but brighter than iron, stronger than stone. Her soldiers inside the fortress kept chanting her name. Their voices thundered, shaking the air, echoing against the valley walls. "Vance! Vance! Vance!" Each shout carried defiance, each cry pushed fear away. The fortress, once a place of despair, had become a place of fire. The Zirath commander roared, furious. He raised his clawed hand, his massive weapon aimed at Illyra. His voice boomed across the field, "Kill her!" Dozens of alien rifles rose. Red lights glowed at their tips, ready to unleash fire that could tear her apart in an instant. The soldiers inside the fortress gasped, some crying out, some reaching toward her as if they could shield her with their own bodies. But Illyra did not move. Her arms were still spread wide, her eyes unblinking. She stood as if her body were already made of stone. She did not fear death, not now, because she knew what she had already done. She had given her people the flame. "Fire!" the commander shouted, but nothing happened. The Zirath soldiers hesitated. Their claws shook on the triggers. Their eyes flickered with uncertainty. They had faced armored humans before. They had faced machines, cannons, fleets of ships. But they had never faced this. A woman with nothing, daring them to strike, daring them to prove her words true. Some weapons lowered. Others flickered and went dark. The commander roared again, enraged. "Do it, she is nothing." Illyra's voice rose before the silence could break. It was not the voice of a warrior now, but of something greater. "If I am nothing, then why do you fear me? If I am nothing, why do you tremble?" Her words cut deeper than any blade. The Zirath army wavered, their ranks shaking. Even the war machines behind them seemed still, their glow dim. And in that hesitation, the humans rose. Inside the fortress, the soldiers lifted their weapons, even the broken ones. They screamed her name louder, their voices turning into a single wave of fire. The wounded stood. The weak found strength in their trembling legs. The hopeless now burned with purpose. Corporal Leon, tears running down his dirt-streaked face, raised his rifle high, though it had no bullets. "For the captain!" he shouted, and the soldiers answered with a roar that made the fortress walls tremble. Something shifted then, something unseen but powerful. The humans were no longer waiting to die. They were alive again. They were fighting again. Illyra felt it. She felt the fire she had lit spread through them, filling every broken soul with strength. And though her body trembled, though she knew death was near, her heart swelled with pride. The Zirath commander snarled and raised his weapon again. His pride could not allow this. His army's hesitation was shameful, his control slipping. He bared his fangs and shouted, "Strike her down!" But Illyra's voice thundered over his. "You cannot kill what does not bow." She stepped forward. One step, then another. Her bare feet pressed into the ash, carrying her closer to the sea of enemies. The humans inside the fortress surged with her. They climbed the broken walls, lifted shattered rifles, hurled rocks, shouted until their throats bled. They knew they might not live, but they also knew something greater. They would not break. The first Zirath fired. A single shot blazed through the smoke, striking the ground near Illyra's feet. Dust and sparks flew, but she did not stop. She raised her chin higher, her fire burning brighter. The humans roared louder. Another alien fired, and the bolt scraped past her arm, leaving a trail of blood. Illyra stumbled, but she did not fall. She pressed forward, her voice raw, shouting over the battlefield. "See, even stripped of armor I stand. Even broken, I rise." The fortress erupted in wild, desperate cheers. Her soldiers pounded their fists against the walls, screamed their fury into the night. Every voice became a weapon. Every shout became a shield. The Zirath faltered. Their commander's orders were drowned in the storm of human defiance. Their weapons wavered again. Their eyes betrayed them. Fear, real fear, spread through their army. And then, something impossible happened. A small group of Zirath lowered their weapons entirely. They stared at her, their bodies trembling. They had never seen such defiance, never faced prey that refused to be prey. Some even stepped back, their boots crunching against the ash. The commander howled with rage, but it did not matter. The cracks had already spread through his army. Illyra bled, her body shaking, but she stood tall. She knew her life was ending. She knew her body could not survive much longer against so many enemies. But she also knew her death would not be the end. It would be the spark. She looked back at her soldiers one last time. Their faces glowed with fire. Their eyes burned with life again. For weeks they had been shadows of themselves, waiting to die. But now they were alive, truly alive. She smiled, a small, tired smile, but filled with pride. And then she faced the enemy once more. Her voice was a whisper, yet it carried across the battlefield like thunder. Even without armor, even without hope, we are human, and we will never bow. The humans roared behind her. The aliens trembled before her. The night itself seemed to hold its breath. The fire had awakened. The valley burned with silence and fire. Smoke curled through the night sky, carrying the smell of ash and blood. The broken fortress behind Illyra Vance thundered with voices, and before her, the Zirath army hesitated like shadows torn by light. Illyra stood at the center of it all. Her body trembled, blood dripping down her arm where the plasma bolt had cut her skin. Her hair stuck to her face, damp with sweat and dirt. She looked fragile, too fragile to stand before an army, but her eyes still blazed, fierce and unbroken. The Zirath commander could no longer hide his rage. His pride had been cut open by her defiance, and every second his army wavered was another wound. His deep guttural roar shook the ground. He raised his massive weapon high and pointed it at her. "Enough," he thundered. "You are nothing but flesh. You are dust before my army, and dust must be crushed." His soldiers answered with growls, but even in their voices cracks showed. Some aimed their weapons, some hesitated. A few even stepped back, unable to meet her burning gaze. Illyra raised her chin. She no longer shouted. She spoke softly, but her words carried like the wind. "If I am only dust, then why do you fear me?" The fortress roared in answer. Her soldiers pounded their fists against the stone, screamed her name until their voices broke. "Vance! Vance! Vance!" Their cries filled the night, louder than cannons, fiercer than fire. The commander roared again, stepping forward. His weapon glowed red, ready to fire. He would not let this stand. He would end her, end the fire she had lit, crush the human's last hope beneath his claws. But Illyra did not move. Her body ached, her blood fell, but her spirit stood taller than the walls behind her. She knew what must happen. She knew what her death would mean. She turned her head slightly, just enough to see her soldiers one last time. Their eyes were wide, burning with fire she had given them. They were no longer waiting for rescue. They were no longer waiting for death. They were alive. They were human. And that was enough. Illyra faced the Zirath commander once more. Her lips curved into a faint smile, not of victory, not of survival, but of peace. She had done what she came here to do. The commander bellowed and fired. The bolt of plasma tore through the air, bright as a falling star. It struck her chest and her body jolted. For a heartbeat she stood, her arms still wide, her head still high. Then the light faded, and she fell to her knees. A cry rose from the fortress, raw, sharp, filled with grief. Corporal Leon screamed her name until his voice broke, his hands clawing the stone. Soldiers wept, some falling to their knees, others pounding their fists against the walls. But the commander's triumph never came. For even as Illyra's body fell, her fire did not die. Her soldiers' grief twisted into fury, their sorrow turned into steel. The fortress erupted not with despair, but with rage. Every human inside rose like fire, their voices thundering louder than ever before. "For Vance!" The broken walls shook as soldiers poured out, weapons raised, rocks hurled, fists clenched. They did not care that their bullets were few, that their bodies were weak, that death waited on every side. They charged with a fury that tore through fear, and the Zirath, an army of machines and monsters, staggered. They had killed her, yet the humans did not fall. They had struck the heart, yet the fire burned brighter. They had broken the body, yet the spirit raged louder than ever. The first wave of humans clashed with the aliens at the gate, their screams like thunder. They fought with guns until the barrels clicked empty, then with knives, then with their bare hands. Every strike carried Elira's fire. Every breath carried her name. Vance, they cried as they fought. Vance, as they bled. Vance, as they refused to bow. The Zirath wavered. Some still fought, their weapons cutting down humans, but for every human that fell, 2 more rose with fury in their eyes. The aliens who had come to see a broken people now faced something they could not explain, an army born not of numbers, but of will. The commander roared, trying to push his soldiers forward. But even he felt it now, the fear, the doubt, the cracks in his own strength. He had killed the human captain, but her spirit still fought before him, carried in every voice, every strike, every cry of defiance. Corporal Leon fought at the front. His rifle was gone, his knife broken, but his fists struck with the strength of fire. Blood streamed down his face, but he screamed louder than anyone. For the captain, for humanity. His voice shook the walls, his body burning with the flame Elira had given him. The fortress, once doomed to fall, became a storm. And in that storm, the humans were no longer just soldiers. They were symbols. They were fire itself. The Zirath fell back. Step by step, their numbers pressed by fewer but fiercer humans. Their commander's roars grew desperate. His army's certainty shattered. For the first time, they felt what it meant to face humans, not machines, not armor, but spirit unbroken. And in the heart of it all lay Elira Vance's body. Still, quiet, yet glowing in the memory of every soldier's eyes. She was gone, but she was everywhere. She was not armor. She was not iron. She was the fire. The battle raged through the night. Humans fell, Zirath fell, but the fire did not. And when dawn came, the fortress still stood, not because of walls, not because of weapons, but because one woman had chosen to stand bare, to burn, to show them what humanity truly was. And in the stories told after, when survivors whispered of that night, they did not say she died. They said she became fire. The Iron Saint was no longer remembered for her armor. She was remembered for the moment she let it fall, for the moment she showed the truth, that even stripped of steel, even stripped of hope, a human heart could burn brighter than an army.